Welcome to the Mindful EPPP Journey and Beyond podcast, where we explore the ganas behind overcoming the adversity of becoming a licensed psychologist. Join Dr. Araceli Lopez Arenas and her supportive community of psychologists as they share their authentic stories of trials, tribulations, and successes, while navigating the unlicensed limbo through humor, self-compassion, and a few F-bombs. Feel like you're climbing Mount Everest without the right gear? You made it this far and maybe you feel like you hit a wall? Well, you've come to the right place. So sit back and relax as you listen to stories that will give you hope, validation, and motivation as you navigate your own journey. Now your host, Dr. Nichole, founder of Ganas and Go.
All right, so we are live. So thank you, Dr. Nichole, for joining us today. So we're live right now on the Ganas and Go Facebook page. We're live on the Mindful EPPP Journey group, and I'm not sure if it's on my personal page as well. That could be. So if you're joining us, thank you for joining us. So welcome to the Mindful EPPP Journey and Beyond. It is a podcast where we explore the ganas behind becoming a licensed psychologist. I am your host, Dr. Nichole, or my professional name is Araceli Lopez Arenas. And today we have Dr. Nichole Vincent, a licensed psychologist. So welcome.
Thank you.
And again, the podcast, so this has been a journey in its development. And the idea is that I want to share people's stories of success. So the EPPP is a licensing exam for psychologists. It's one of the last things that we do at the end of our career after we've, completed our master's, our doctoral program. We've completed practicums, internships, a postdoc. We've accrued licensure hours. We've filled out so many different forms for our respective state boards and our respective doctoral programs. And the end of this is passing this exam, along with any other state requirements. And my goal with this podcast is to share how people do it, especially for some of us that have struggled a little bit in passing the exam. And ganas in Spanish means it's a combination. It's a very powerful word, especially for Latinos, Latinx, especially Mexicanos. And it's about like you have grit, you have resilience, persistence. And I couldn't be more excited to talk to Dr. Nichole today, just because I think she exemplifies the ganas and the grit that it takes to pass this exam. So I'm really excited to have you on. First and foremost, I would like to thank some of the founding members of the Mindful EPPP Journey. This is something that developed out of my own frustration and just kind of lack of power in passing the exam. And when I saw this image, I was like, yeah, that's exactly what it feels like. We're climbing this last mountain. And I've had a lot of great supporters, including Dr. Patricia Celaya, Dr. Angel Glover, Chantel Frazier, Dr. Melissa Munoz, Dr. Veronica Mercado, Dr. May Bayani, all of who have supported this journey and let me pick their brains about this process, and including Dr. Vincent, Dr. Nichole. So welcome, Dr. Nichole Vincent. A lot of you know you from, I know that I met you through the various Facebook EPPP groups, including and I'm going to butcher the name, but can you tell us the name before I butcher it?
Sure. So we met in one of the other EPPP groups, and you hopped into a group I created after I had passed. So I passed in May of 2019. And so in October, I believe I launched my group. So my group is it's for multiple test takers. So people like myself and Dr. Nichole and so many other people I define multiple test taker as you attempted this thing once, it did not go the way we wanted. And then you're having to take it a second time or more. So my group is called From Pissed Off to Passing, a group for EPPP comebacks, because that really embodied my own process and journey. And I find it's also embodied so many other people's process and journey. And so I honestly, like initially when I was coming up with the name for my group, I was like, I wanted the word rage in the group, which is not something like it takes a lot to get me really angry. But I have had, and I still have so much like anger towards this fucking exam. Also, if I'll just go ahead and probably give a disclaimer, I'm probably going to drop some F-bombs. So if you are sensitive, it is not meant to be offensive. It is just my own expression.
Thank you, because I do that too as well. So
yeah.
yeah. So can you tell us a little bit about your background, just your education and training, why you decided to become a psychologist, anything in relation to diversity in terms of the addressing model, and a little bit of your doctoral experience before we jump into the actual EPPP. I like to get a little bit of background. And as I was explaining, behind the scenes is I think that when we get to the point of the EPPP, we're all starting at different stepping stones. We all, depending on, I think if we were to do a research study on this, I think your doctoral experience could probably be a predictor, but any other background. So yeah, please take it away.
Sure. So I'll just share a little bit in terms of like my background. So I grew up as an only child in it's actually not a little town. I live in a tiny little town right now in Texas, a little border town. But I grew up primarily in Georgia, so in the South. My parents I would consider them more middle class, and they divorced when I was 9, and there's custody stuff anyway, stuff for another day. Fast forward to I got into undergrad and I chose to go out of state for undergrad, which also was a financial burden. I still probably would have done it in retrospect, but going out of state and paying out of state tuition when you have a certain grade aspect that you can go pretty much like have it covered in your own home state. I chose not to do that because I just wanted to get out of where I lived. So that started like my awful student loan debt. So I got actually my bachelor's degree in criminal justice. Initially, I wanted to be a criminal profiler, which was super inspired by X-Files. And I don't know if anybody's watched that show. And like watching
Old enough.
yeah. Like there's also a great movie called The Bone Collector. And so I got really inspired and I was like, ooh, I want to do that. And I want to catch bad guys. And so I got my bachelor's in criminal justice, which was like a cakewalk. I still worked hard for it, but it was like compared to everything since then, I'm like, that was so easy. And then I took the GRE right out of undergrad and I scored, I don't remember, really low. I also, by the way, took the GRE 6 times. So I was hoping not to take the EPPP that many times. And ended up taking it 8 times before I passed on my 8th try. But that also is part of like my own test anxiety. And so I didn't have high enough scores to start a psychology degree outside of my bachelor's. And so what I did is I took some gap years. I worked when I was 22, my father passed away. And which was like the first person I was close to basically that died. And I'll share why I'm bringing that up in a moment. And then I I took the GRE a few more times, didn't score high enough still from my own standards and for graduate school cutoffs. So I was like, let me get some more hours of psychology. So I enrolled in a master's program in Louisiana where I was living at the time and got some hours. And I finished all of my course credits from a master's degree with the exception of my thesis. And so at the end of my master's program, I was like, okay, well, I'm still going to apply to like doctoral programs right now, and got in, which was great. And one of the things, and I was just going to come back to finish my thesis. And then my doctoral program was like, hey, your hours don't really matter to us because it was a terminal master's program. So you're going to have to retake all that shit anyway. So I was like, well, fuck it. I'm not going to travel back twice to like propose and defend and all that stuff. So anyway, at the end of my master's program, it was significant, or what was significant for me is the program coordinator and it was a really small program. I think I was like 8 or 9 of us as students. She was like, and I had a lot of trouble with like exams. So I would, in my undergrad, I didn't have trouble taking a test. Like I would still get anxious, but I would like be able to complete it. I didn't really notice brain fog or like my mind going blank, things like that. And at the end, she's just like, all of us in terms of the professors and the faculty, like they would stay late for me to finish. I would be the last person. And I would take on average, like, let's say 30 minutes more because I would get myself so psyched up. And what I noticed is that there was a difference with undergrad tests. It was mostly multiple choice, short answer, fill in the blank. So in my master's program, it was like essay. And I'm like, well, I'm already really wordy. So, and then I would like try to exhaustively include all the details so I could like max out the points. And that made me really anxious. So she's like, you might want to get tested because I don't know if like your doctoral program is going to like just be nice basically and like stay like we did. So I got tested and then I had accommodations all through my graduate program, which was great and also not great because my exams were then like, I had up to 5 hours. So I would like max out my 5-hour time limit, which was in retrospect, I guess, great training for the EPPP for stamina. I didn't think about that till just now, but that was really helpful. And it also just, I think, turned up the volume on my anxiety. So I would psych myself up. My hands would get sweaty. I would get sweaty. My heart rate would go up. I was just like in this like anxious state the whole time I'd be taking a test. And really, I probably should have started medication. But every time I would like psych myself up and then it's like I'd crash and I'd be like, oh, it's like a relief until the next test. And I basically did that for 5 years in my graduate program. And I didn't go to therapy for that. I didn't see a psychiatrist and get medication. And so with my doctorate program, they had a master's en route to doctorate, basically, is what they called it. And on the day that I got my master's certificate, I was 29. And it was delivered at my door. And I had found out later that day, because I'd shared that information with my mom. Like I texted her, like, hey, look. And I found out my mom passed away that day. So,
Oh, wow.
yeah. So I'm sharing that because there's been so many conversations I've had with people who are also studying for the EPPP, and I was not studying at that juncture, but who have experienced, and especially with COVID, so many losses. And I definitely think that my experience of those losses, like at 22 and 29, and even since then, really prepared me for like a grief experience related to when I would fail the EPPP. And I didn't really put those pieces together until I started to think about this time and how I wanted to, like the things that were important for me to share. But failing is totally like a grief, or at least for myself and for a number of people I've spoken to. It's been like a very visceral, like grief, not the same as loss of a person, but it's like this loss of something that we've really wanted, that we worked really, 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 really hard for, and we don't get it. And it just feels like, and I've never been like punched or hit or anything like that, but it literally feels like somebody has just like wailed on my stomach and like my heart just dropped.
Yep.
And anyway, so
And I have to say that what's so unique about you is that because, because we're both very active on the Facebook platforms and we're just like cheerleaders and support and,
yes, we are.
like,
We're
like
fucking good hype squad. I just want to throw that out there. So cheers to that.
And I think that one awesome thing that you do, and I think that's how like we also connected, is that I love you because you actually give a shit. Like you take the time to ask people to check in and say, hey, how are you doing? Where you at? And you were just telling me you're about to do that because I think you do that once a month. So I think you have the unique perspective that you are hearing people's stories. And as people are reaching out to me as well, or I kind of like, because I always want to know like what's going on, because it's like what's helpful. And that grief and loss theme, right? Not especially during COVID, where we're literally losing people, we're literally losing jobs, but it's this sense of loss that is different than any other I've ever experienced. So thank you for connecting that and that sharing how you were to some extent prepared to deal with grief and loss in your life.
Yeah. And so I finished, just to also be mindful of time, but I finished my doctorate degree. I graduated in 2016. My doctorate degree, I felt, did a great job of getting me ready for internship. because and to get them to graduate, because that's their job, right? And they care about attrition rates and all of that jazz. I do not feel that my university prepared me at all for the EAAA. And an example of that, and what I've heard from a lot of people I've spoken with as well, is like we didn't have I feel like there should be a course that sort of prepares you. I know that they teach you the content, like child developmental and like all these other things, like research and stats, but they don't really emphasize, from my perspective, or at least in my experience, the things that, hey, you really got to make sure you have this stuff on lock, because you're going to see this come up on the EAAA, or even seminars to prepare you for the EAAA. They did not have that. We did not have an alternate, like an option to do an IO class. I know some universities require that as part of the curriculum. Mine didn't even have it as like an elective that you could take. So, which is such a big part of the EAAA.
Right.
So there were many places that I felt like my university did not prepare. I know some universities also give students, like they're able to secure discounts for grants, usually like one, not like across the board for all 5 testing programs. But my university didn't have that either. Like it's not, so yeah. So it's like, let's get you to graduate. All right, cool. And you got internship. Awesome. Like, bye. Like that was pretty much it.
And also to note that you did a PsyD program and I did a PhD program, and I can echo what you just said. So that's also across the board, because I know there's some research that says that like, PsyD programs, but PhD as well. There's a lot of programs that are not preparing us enough to get to this point. And some postdoc programs, formal postdocs like APA, APIC accredited, embed that into their programming, which is awesome. But if you don't do a formal postdoc like I did, then you're kind of just left to kind of figure it out on your own. So I think that's a good point about, if somebody is in a program, to ask that, in your program, or recommend that if you've already finished. So that's a good point. So thank you for that. So I'm curious, and I know a lot of our listeners and viewers are interested in terms of the EAAA journey, and we're going to talk about this in a few ways. I think first of all is just the logistics, right? So the questions that people have, whether they're just starting the journey or whether they're in it and they haven't passed and they're kind of thinking like, okay, I need to re-strategize. So can you tell us a little bit, you've told us you're a multiple test taker, you passed it on your 8th time, which, wow, what a champion. So what was the time span? About how much do you guesstimate that you've spent? What are the materials? I think that you are really awesome in the sense that, despite your experience, you're pretty versed on all the different companies. And just what was your process? How did your study process look like? And how did that pivot after each time that you did not pass?
So for me, and I'll kind of briefly talk about the different things I did with the different companies. And I also have I think it's 6 or 7 pages long. I typed up after I passed a list of all the things that I did. So in terms of the time frame, I'll start there. It took me 2.5 years to pass. And I started I'll say like baby little EAAA me, started very blindly. And I did not shop around. I did not try out different programs to see which one worked for me. I basically looked up. There were 4 test companies at that time, so PrepJet did not exist. If I wish that they had, and if they had, I would have definitely started with them, or Psych Prep first. I did do Psych Prep, but later. I started with Taylor Study Method, and I started with it because as I mentioned earlier, I already had a hard time with exams. So the GRE 6 times, and then just my grad school process. So my master's program, just that test anxiety had started and continued for 2 years, and then also got worse in my doctorate program, but I had that extra time. So, which was very helpful. So for me, I picked Taylor Study Method because on their website, it says we have a 94% pass rate. And I'm like, well, I only fucking want to do this once. I don't even really want to do it once, but you're telling me I have to. And I already thought I did all the hard stuff, getting my doctorate, which I worked my ass off for that amount of time, 5 years. So I'm like, I don't want to take any chances. So I'm like 94. I didn't see anybody else say 94. Other companies did pass their pass rate. So I literally picked them based on their number, which ended up being a very big mistake and I didn't try them out. Like I said, I signed up with them for like a 6-month package.
And I'll also like to interject and note that everybody's experience is very different, and different companies work differently for different people. So it's not to say that any one test company is like better or worse, although we do have we're biased towards certain ones. We have our preferences.
Yes.
But this is not to talk bad about any testing program. This is, your personal experience, and some people pass for the first time with
for sure
each one. So, but this is
Absolutely.
just kind of making that point, and that it's not if you do this, if you follow A, B, and C, then you get this output. But yeah, so it was not a good fit for you at that time.
It was not.
Right?
It was. So my first 2 attempts, I used Taylor study method, and I will backtrack a minute to say when I wanted to study, I think I wanted November of whatever year I started to start. And like I had it click. I'm sure lots of people had like a core group of people in your doctorate program that you like leaned on and studied with, and like, your peeps. And so when I started to get ready to study, kind of preparing towards the end of internship year, and I started to like message people, and like we were all kind of doing different things, trying to transition some of us to postdoc, some of us to a staff position right out of internship. I chose to do a postdoc. None of my people, like 4 people, were like, no, Nichole, like we're not there yet. And I'm like, but come on, like, and so I am something about me is I'm a really great self-starter about some things. Like if it's anything creative, decorative, colorful, adventurous, I'm like, I will plan that trip. I'll make that itinerary. Let me look up flights. Like I will do the things. If it's things that I'm like not looking forward to, i.e. studying, or working out, I am someone who does best when I have accountability. So when I have other people doing the things with me that I don't want to be doing, then that helps me do the things.
Same. Yeah.
Yeah. So this was one of those things where I'm like, I had my ducks in a row. I picked my program, and then I'm like, hey guys, let's go. Let's get was ready. And nobody wanted to study when I was ready to start. And that was really, really hard for me. Over the course of my own time with the EPPP, I did do like several different boot camps and study groups. And to be honest, like the first couple I did, I was more of like, I was a lurker in a group, like in a leech, like I would just be there for the resources, and like I really wouldn't contribute. I didn't really like post questions. I didn't really share stuff about my own experience or aha moments or, hey, I found this cool video, or I was not that person. And being someone who runs a group, I'm like, oh, that's so annoying. I was so annoying as a group member. And I just was like sucking on the resources. And so anyway, none of my people wanted to study. So I did Taylor study method. I failed my first 2 times. I don't remember my scores, but I do remember my first 2 times. I think the first time I spent 3 months studying straight. I don't remember how many hours a week or how I did it, but I would even go into work on the weekends just to have like kind of set up testing condition environment with like my phone's off, and I'm like sitting in a place that's more like how I might sit at the testing center, things like that. So did those things, took tests. I did not get even close to a passing score on a practice exam, but I worked so hard and so dedicated. For the 3 months, I was like, hope and a prayer. It's going to be okay. It was not okay. I got a 3 something. I just remember it was in the 300 range the first time I tested. And then I went back to the drawing board with Taylor study method and going through their program and process, and still didn't get high scores, but I was like, I'm going to try again. In between the first and second attempt, so this was at my postdoc, we did have like hours. They did give us, I think, maybe 2 or 3 hours during our postdoc that we could like have dedicated study time, which was nice. But in terms of having materials or anything, that was not something that my postdoc provided either. So everything I was really doing on my own. and figuring out on my own. I also tried to like rope my postdoc partner. There was one other postdoc there to like, hey, study with me. And even he, like, for the first, I don't know, half of our postdoc was like, I'm good. Like, I'm not ready yet. And I was like, still struggling because, like I said, none of my people were like ready.
Mm-hmm.
And then he later went on to not even sign up for a program. He paid for the EPPP Pocket Prep app, which we practiced together. He took half, not even a whole practice test. He took half of a old practice test and passed on his first try. And I was like, are you kidding me? But I was also really happy. We also tested on the same day when he tested, which was an awful, terrible idea. I do not recommend doing that for anybody. So we tested in the same testing center on the same day. He started like an hour before me, and we had plans after so his first time was my second time. And we had plans after to like go see a movie, and I still went, but that was so like, I did not want to go, but I wanted to also be supportive of him.
I think that's a really good point, because we see that in the groups a lot, is like, yes, we're grateful and we're like, wow, congratulations, you did it. But a lot of people, and I've heard this a lot, and even I myself, and I push past it, right? It's a little like, I wish I would. It stings a little, but that doesn't take away of like how happy you are that somebody passed. It's like, good, like you made it, like awesome. And it's also like, oh, I wish I would have passed too, Yeah. So I acknowledge you for noting that, because I think that's an internal struggle, is that we don't want to take away from somebody else, but also validating our experience is important as well. But I know that I try my best to, like, as soon as I see somebody passes, I'm like, congratulations, that's amazing. Like that's excellent. So, because I know how hard it is for some people. So yeah.
And that certainly was definitely like my experience too, especially in the groups. And a piece that I kind of skimmed over is when I was initially starting my journey, like figuring out like studying. And before I started, I joined all the Facebook groups I could find at the time. And now there's more, which is great. And I would see, like, anytime I logged on and I would see people post that they failed, and I would, like, my anxiety would just like I said, like the hands sweating, I start sweating, like I would notice my heart rate go up on my Fitbit, like, and not even doing anything, just reading, but just seeing that. And I would just get it's like a sense of dread. And I'm like, and I felt like almost every time I would like look in the group, somebody was like posting that they failed for whatever number of times. And I'm just like, and then also seeing people post like, I passed on my first try. And I'm like, which before I took it the first time was hopeful. Like, it gave me motivation. And I was like, oh, that's going to be me. And then it wasn't me. And then I had so much like sort of like what you're talking about, like that dialectic of, we want to like be hyped up and excited for somebody for passing because we know how hard it is. And also at the same time being like, that wasn't my experience. Like, how did they and not me? And then we kind of get into that comparison trap, which is not good for anybody.
Yeah. And so that was a lesson, a growth area for me, is that we have to apply everything that we learn, that we teach our clients and our patients, right? So the DBT stuff, the CBT, the mindfulness, the behavioral activation, the ACT, all these different interventions that we teach our patients, we kind of have to apply them to ourselves, especially that CBT part where, we can go one or two tracks, right? We can spiral down with the cognitive distortions and getting into the social comparison. And especially with social media, that, we know that it can negatively impact our mental health. Or for me, it was choosing to scroll through, what are those like stories of triumph? I know that part of the inspiration for this podcast is listening to NPR's podcast on How I Built This. And also diving into Brene Brown's work, just like full on. I even have her book here in my bookcase because she was so
over today.
Rising Strong was just so pivotal for my upward swing, and then looking mindfully, and then also mindfulness, hence the mindful HBB journey, is being mindful of what are those stories that I consume. And really, I there was a point where I was looking at all the stories of triumph. Didn't matter first time, second time, nth time, what did they do? What can I grasp onto? Because, at some point you're just grasping, you're like, I need some motivation to keep going. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. So going back a little bit to cost and any other study materials that you did, that you used, and then we'll talk about like how you did it. But
yeah. So in between my first and second time, I had actually interviewed for a job for a staff psychologist position. And what was really great about that is I had to be licensed within the first 2 years. So I was really I was gunning hard to be licensed before I started that position on a postdoc. However, it just did not happen. And I felt awful because it's part of my interview, they asked about my, like, where am I at licensure process? And I
Yep.
explained, and I'm about to take it or I took it once, I'm about to take it again. I don't remember what it was. But anyway, I took it twice. So I did get the job, and the nice thing also that I know not everybody has that experience is they paid me as if I was already licensed.
Oh, okay.
So yes, which was nice. However, in comparison to like the salary I'm making now as a licensed psychologist working in a different sort of industry, I'm like, that was nothing. But I look at it also as like, okay, well, postdoc paid me. I didn't make enough to live on in postdoc. And then I doubled that for that position for 3 years where I did get licensed. And now I'm like, it's not double, but it's like significantly a lot more. So now I'm like, okay, well, now I'm just going to like, how can I keep going up? But anyway, so after I failed the 2 times with Taylor study method, I switched gears. I don't remember what I switched to next, to be honest with you. I think after I failed the second time, I think some of my friends were studying or open to studying more. So in particular, I have one of my besties, and her and I also, like, we both get the same sort of anxiety around exams. And we studied for almost every single exam together in grad school. And so I was so stoked when she was like finally ready to start going, because I'm like, this is what I need. Like, this is what I've been wanting. And I was like so happy because we basically like started our own little 2-person study group. And we are super hardcore. So when I go hardcore, I mean, like, I'm all in. And easier when somebody who is on your level of being all in is helpful. And
Yeah,
so
I kind of attribute that now to just the trans-theoretical model, right? Stages of change. Where are people at? Are they in pre-contemplation, contemplation, action? And you want to be with the people that are in action. Like, all right, let's go. Let's do it.
yes.
Yeah.
So she was using psych prep. At that time, I think I had some really great friends who shared some materials with me. So between ATABs, academic review, things like that. So I was using a bunch of different materials. I found that ATABs, for myself, I liked their exams, but I didn't like their volumes of material. And the same thing with academic review. It was too overwhelming for myself, which is what I ran into Taylor study method. So I already knew, at least from my experience with them and failing using them, like it was too much. Like, I was too saturated with content. And so used a mix of like ATABs, academic review. I found parts of it I liked, parts of it I didn't. I also did the psych prep weekend workshop. I started listening to Dr. Jablon. Failed in between all this. I'm kind of like squishing everything together because I don't remember the exact timeline, but failed more times. I think around my fifth time, around my fifth time, I think I got a 495. Fifth or sixth time. And around that time, after I failed my fourth time, actually, let me back up, is when PrepJet was like a new kid on the block. And because I had already experienced like the workshops with the other programs that existed and the materials and figured out like what worked and what didn't work for me, I signed up with PrepJet. And I failed a few times with them. and I attribute my failure, not the first one, but at least the second and the third, is I overexposed myself to the content and the tests. So what I mean by that, and this is where a lot of people I also find fall into, is you get a false sense of confidence because you take. So for me, I took there were 5 tests available at that time. Now there's 6, but I took literally all of their exams 6 times, spaced out, but it was still within like a short amount of time, within like a 12-month period or so. So I took all of their exams 6 times, so that's 30. And I took all of their subdomain quizzes twice. I read their content who knows how many times. I also bought their lectures when those came out, like towards the end of my experience, and was scoring in like the 80s on my practice exams. And I was so stoked because I had not ever gotten that high before, but I didn't realize at the time that that was like practice effects. And like I had this false sense of confidence, took the test and failed. So then I switched up again. I like finished, I still love prep jet and psych prep. I think from my experience, like they did the best job or do the best job of like sectioning and organizing content. So it is not like drinking from a fire hose, because that's what my experience before that was.
Yep.
I didn't know anything but to drink from the fire hose of EAAA content. And I'm like, this is not working. It just made me feel overwhelmed all the time.
Yep. And then you lose steam, and then that feeds into the lack of motivation. And then, so we'll talk about that, the emotional, psychological piece in a moment, but I'm glad that you mentioned that. So those are my top 2 as well. So, and the 2 that I'm using. Mm-hmm.
So by the time I passed, to answer in terms of cost, because we covered the first couple already and some of the latter bullets, I'm estimating, I meant to dig up my old tax return, because the first year I was able to claim a bunch of that on my taxes. The second year they changed something with the tax code. So professional development, I was not able to claim EAAA expenses. But I'm guesstimating that I was at about $13,000 of debt at the time that I finished. Most of that I charged to credit cards. There were times that for Christmas or for my birthday, I was like asking family members, I'm like, I don't need anything other than like money for this test, or can you please help me pay for this exam? Because at almost $700 a pop, and I took it 8 times. Plus I rescheduled it like outside of the 30-day window. So that's almost $90.
It's like $90. Yeah.
Yeah. I did that 5 or 6 times in total for my journey. Not including my licensure expenses, and my application also expired. During my process, so I had to repay my board more money for information they already had on me, and get new fingerprints, because apparently I'm like, well, my fingerprints are the same as they were like a year and a half ago, but sure, I'll pay another $70 to get them done because you're making me. So there were a lot of things like that I experienced, but roughly I would say $13,000 is my estimate in terms of my cost. Yeah. And the other thing, study materials wise, that I found the most helpful. So Dr. DeBlanc to me was the best audio. Not everybody.
Hands down.
Yeah.
Hands down.
Sound like,
I love her.
Yes. And I have had a 2-hour commute each way to work. So that's 4 hours round trip, where I would be driving every day for my job, my last job. And I would listen to her on my way there, on my way back. And that was really helpful in terms of using my commute in that way. I also did the academic review 6-week workshop with some friends. That was really helpful. I also did the academic review / ATABS, because they're the same company, 4-day live workshop. And that was like a massive brain dump of all things EAAA. It's like you're in class like 9 hours a day, and it's just like, it's a lot, but it was
That's
also
how I started. Yeah. Yeah. That's how I did before I did anything. Somehow at the job where I was at, somebody sent an email about some coupon of some sort. I was underemployed at that time. So I don't even know how I was able to afford that, but I paid the whatever, $500, $600, and for 4 days, and I was like, all right, I don't know where to start, but this workshop sounds like it's a good intro. but I left like, wow, this is a lot of information. But it was good. It was good to go and know. And now looking back at some of the people I remember that were there, I'm like, oh, I totally get some of their reactions to some questions. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, but that was how I jumped into the EPPP pool with
Ooh,
the 4-day
that's like,
workshop.
I thought I was deep end. I think that's more of a deep end jump. Like, yeah, I can't
Yeah,
imagine, because at least when I was, consuming content from like the HP fire hose, I was pacing, whereas that workshop, it's paced and structured for you. So you're sitting
mhm,
there. So I can't even imagine like condensing that into, I mean, it was helpful for me when I found like I had already, for the most part, mastered content. It was
mhm.
just like a review. And I know some people use that workshop at like as a review right before they test. I know when I
Right.
did the workshop, there were probably a handful of people out of like, let's say 30 that were there-ish. This was pre-COVID,
Mhm.
obviously, who were testing like that Monday. So the workshop was wrapping
Right.
up Monday and they were testing on Monday. I'm like, how do you, I don't, okay.
Now I get it, and now I'm like, okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. So being mindful of the time as well, I wanted to kind of dig in a little bit just in terms of, using the CBT model here on the slide. I have the CBT model, our thoughts, our feelings, our behaviors, and our physical effects. And then the lotus flower representing mindfulness, because for me, I found that that's very helpful to be mindful, be aware, be present, focused as to the experience. So could you share a little bit with us what that experience was, kind of the impact, if there's been any adverse impact on in your life, your career, and then how did you get through it? Like for those of us that are listening that maybe like, Brene Brown calls it in that swamp and, or act, we're in that hole. How did you get out of that? What was your experience and what did you do?
Hmm. So the adverse impact for me had more to do with a financial consequence. So as I mentioned earlier, my postdoc paid me very little, but there were other reasons I picked my postdoc, not for the money. It was to be close to my partner, and so that, I mean, it was worth it for me, even though I did go into a lot of debt because I wasn't able to live off of my salary.
Mhm.
So the biggest adverse impact for me, I would say, is a financial one. I know a lot of people I speak to and have spoken with like have lost their jobs because they have not been able to get
Yep.
licensed. And I was coming up
Mhm.
really close to that. So I passed in May, but my 2-year mark for that job was August 1st.
Mhm.
And I had failed so many times. I'm like, I don't know if this is like, I don't know what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
But my boss, like, I never brought that up with her, mostly because I was so anxious about like, I already felt so much pressure. I didn't think that I could take the pressure of like, yeah, actually, if you're not licensed by August 1st, like, you can't work here anymore. Like, I think that would have probably been like the nail in the coffin at that point. I don't know what I would have done or what I would have like, it just would have, yeah, I don't know how that would have impacted my studying or my performance, studying or work, but I would say the financial aspect is the biggest. In terms of the things that got me through, so having really supportive people, as I mentioned, so my best friend passed in September, and she kept, because that's how hardcore she was or is. She kept studying with me. We would review content in the car. We would go over the mnemonics that we came up with in the car, like on my commutes home, because I had the longest commute. So she's like, no, we're doing this. And that's just like her mindset. So I knew, like I
Yeah.
said, once I could get her on board to studying, like
Mhm.
it would be so helpful. But also having supportive, um, my boss was very supportive in terms of as much as she could be in terms of allowing me to have time. I couldn't study at work, but she would let me take off time from work. That still had to come out of my vacation time or my sick time, but
Right.
whatever. At least granting me the approval to take days off before my test to better prepare or take off time for that workshop, for example. Really being creative in terms of
Mhm.
thinking outside the box. So every time I failed, which is why I have like a 6 or 7 page document of things I did, including like extreme things like hypnotherapy for test anxiety, to acupuncture, to medication, to meditation. I mean, I made collages of positive affirmations. I put Post-it notes all over my house of like, you can do this, and
Yeah.
you can mix this many questions and still pass. Like on my bathroom mirror, like every time I basically I pulled out all the stops that I possibly could. So I color coordinated things. I did all, like I said, the workshops, all the audios, anything I could find. I did it. Um, any study group I could join, even when I was like a beeper lurcher person, just to suck all the resources. Like I did that. And then I started to contribute more. I also like got positive shirts for myself. So every time I tested, I wore a different shirt that said a
Oh my
positive.
gosh, I made my own t-shirt.
Yes,
with
I remember.
that.
I
Yeah.
saw it.
Yeah, I've made a couple t-shirts that for myself, and now I also have them up on a store. But yeah,
Yeah.
any little like it's like we're our
Any,
own cheerleaders,
yes.
Yeah.
I put, because you're not allowed to wear jewelry, like I put good luck stuff in my bra. Like I did, I did.
I didn't know that one.
It was like a bracelet my mom had given me, like a mustard seed, of faith. Anyway, yeah, like some of my shirts said like I cannot quit because I'm currently too legit. Another one said like I can and I will, watch me. Like I would just, and towards the end, I actually let one of my friends pick my shirt and I framed it with my license. So
Really? Oh my
yeah,
gosh.
it's in my office. I'll have to send you a picture. So
Yeah.
it's in my work office, not my home, but. So she picked the shirt. I was like, maybe somebody else needs to pick the thing I'm supposed to wear. And so she picked the shirt. And I was like, okay, I'm buying it right now. And so the shirt said, nevertheless, she persisted. And
Love
underneath
it.
that, it said, the future is female. And so
Uh-huh.
I bought it. That's what I wore the day I passed. And like I said, I framed it. I cut it. I framed it with my license right now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yes, you have
So
to post a picture of that.
yeah. So oh, this might sound silly, but again, I'm talking about like really thinking outside of the box, and anything that I could think of. Like, what is something I didn't do? Is there something I didn't look at, didn't read, didn't listen to, didn't watch, didn't like whatever think about? I wrote on the bottom, I forgot where this idea came from, but I literally like got a marker and on the bottom of my feet, I wrote pass on one foot and then each will pee on the other foot. And that helped me. That was like a grounding thing for me that helped keep both my feet on the ground, like literally when I was testing, and just
Mhm.
kind of help anchor me in the moment, just figuring out whatever I could do. So those are some of the more kind of different things that I did. And really coming up, so I spent so much time trying to find visual aids. So once I did all 5 programs, a deficit I find in all of them is for visual learners like myself. So if
Yep.
we can't, like I'm very visual and colorful. And like
And
tailored study
just
methods.
her background right now, because this is gonna be a podcast episode. It's a beautiful bookcase. I've commented on this before. It's like color, like it's I love color. I study the psychology of joy just because of this experience, and it's like beautifully color coded and it's bright and it's very lovely. So so I'm also a visual person as well. I think that's why we connected so well.
Yes. And Chelly, fun fact for listeners and viewers, also makes jewelry. I do too.
Yeah.
There's some of it, which I've been doing for like 15 years. But, and that's just my own like art therapy thing that
Yep.
I like. But for me, creating my own, I tried so hard to find visuals like on Pinterest or Google, and I wasted so much time. I also bought what was labeled as like visual. Well, not actually, I don't think that they were labeled as visual aids. They might have been labeled as like mnemonics. But I bought other tools thinking like this is going to be the thing that I'm looking for. And I couldn't find anything that really fit what I was looking for. So towards the end of my journey, probably after I failed the sixth time, I started to make my own visuals and my
Yep.
own like mnemonic. And it was really time consuming. So I actually didn't go and finish until after I passed because I wanted to share that with other people who were learners like myself. Because I was like, I can't be the only person that's like, all this sucks. There's nothing out there.
You're absolutely right, because I am such a visual learner myself. So I think part of what makes our connection so strong is that we're both jewelry makers. Like as we kept talking, we're like, wait, you do this, and wait, me too.
And you love dogs.
Yes, we're both fur mamas. And I think the visual piece for me after the second, going into the third, was like I had to pivot. I had to take a step back and look at, okay, Chelly, what are you doing? What are you not doing? You need to re-strategize. I also spend a lot of time, like if I read, I'm like, that doesn't make sense. Show me a visual and boom, it clicks. And I started creating my own. I think we were both like launching around similar times. And for me, that's why my coping mechanism is to create the visual study guides, because in this process, I also discovered, and I think for people listening, it's like, take a moment. So I think part of the difficulty with this is that being a psychologist is our identity because it's been for so long. We've been indoctrinated in this field. We've been enculturated into this academic lifestyle, and any deviation from that is like less than, right? Or at least for me, it felt less than. And so I get a lot of people, well, you're wasting time creating those visuals. Just take the test. But it's like, that doesn't work for me. I have to have a visual. And if I create it, right? So it's encoding, I'm encoding the information in a different way. And to me, it's fun. I discovered I love graphic design. I discovered it's interesting because in undergrad and grad, whenever there was any group project, I was like, I'll do the PowerPoint. I'll work on that. And so
that was me too, honestly. I'm like, I'll make it pretty.
I'll make it pretty. I'll make it clear and visually represent what we're trying to say. And I think what we're tapping into is for those listening, what are you good at? Or what is that thing that like you probably have downplayed a little bit, but that's actually your strength. And I think for you, I know I purchased your visual study guides, and I haven't gone through all of them yet. And I'm sure there's some overlap there, but I think that's amazing that you created your own study guides, and they are available. We're going to talk about that in a little bit, but I just love that and I think that's the overlap between a doctorate and an entrepreneurship, is that in academia, we find a problem. There's a gap in the literature, right? And we're like, oh, this is an issue. I'm going to research it. I'm going to fill that gap. That's what makes us unique as doctoral level clinicians, right? And for entrepreneurs are parallel in that way, in that they say, there's a problem here. Enough people have this consistent problem. I have an idea that can fix that. I can fill that gap. And I think that's what makes us really unique as doctorate level entrepreneurs. And I love that you are talking about your visual study guides, because I think they're amazing. So keep going.
Thank you. And I like that you brought that up. I haven't apparently my earlobes are just shaped weird and my little earbuds won't stay in. But I love that you brought that parallel up in terms of like the research curiosity aspect of being a psychologist, and also the aspect of being an entrepreneur, because we also share that connection as well of having multiple entrepreneur avenues that we're doing simultaneously along with our practices.
And because we're also doing the Dave Ramsey plan to the Financial Peace University to get out of debt. Just want to plug that in for those who have high debt like us.
So, which is a really big motivator for me. Like financial freedom is like, I'm calling that my love language right now. And last year, freedom was my word. And that mostly had a lot to do with financial. But anyway, it's another thing for another day. But creating my own really helped me. And I didn't know at the time that anybody would find value in it. But towards the end of my own study kind of journey before I passed, I was like, well, if I find value, and I was sharing it with my study buddies at the time, I had a really great study buddy experience. It it was actually Tina G, had reached out to me, which was super random. She saw me show up a bunch of times in the other group. So even though I was like kind of a creeper lurcher, like sucking up the resources, I would still show up on the calls. Even so, she would see my name. I guess I actually didn't know who she was. When she's like, "Hey, we've been in some of the same groups. Do you want to?" I'm like trying to get a study group together, and I was like, "Sure." And it was like me, her, and two other people, and we were all hardcore, and that helped as well. We met several times a week, couple hours. But I shared my stuff with them, and they're like, "This is so helpful," and like, "I understand this now." And I was like, "Really?" And so it kind of really motivated me to keep like creating and keep doing it. And I really wish I just would have started that at the beginning, because
Mhm.
I think I could have saved myself so much heartache and money and time and attempts if I
Mhm.
had just done what I thought I should have done in the beginning, but I didn't figure it out until the end.
So let me pause you there for a moment. So in terms of the EPPP journey and like how you passed and some words of wisdom, but we do have some viewers that have some questions.
Oh,
Yeah, so I'm just kind of again, this I'm new to
let me take
this, so
notes.
I'm
I
just
hope I can answer your question.
So Ednalis Pagan Romney, I'm sorry if I don't pronounce it correctly. Earlier, she had talked about the expectation, and when you're talking about the grief and loss, it's like when you go in to take the exam a couple of times and you go in like, yeah, this is my time, and then it doesn't happen, right? Dr. Veronica Mercado noted, like after the 4-day live workshop, how we feel physically ill. And she's actually giving you kudos for your study materials, which are great. And some of the things that she's done is, writing 75 and above, 75 and above. Because in New York, you have to have a 75 and above. It's the equivalent of a 500 for the rest of us.
Which is fucking
And
ridiculous. I'm just gonna go on record saying that.
say that again.
Oh, I just said I'm gonna go on record saying that that's fucking ridiculous.
Yeah.
Only so.
And I'm sorry if I mispronounced the name, but Thu Gunalakis, Dr. Gunalakis, asked, how did you study when you finally did pass? So this connects with our next slide about, your words of wisdom. So on that 8th attempt, so you've done all of this throughout your journey, and what was the thing that you think just I talk about for those people that I interact with. I really delved into sports psychology and positive psychology and mindset. Like mindset has been so key for me in improving my scores. And I talk about I thought about like what's a sport that seems like absolutely ridiculous? Like you're like, how the fuck do you do that, right? And I was scrolling through YouTube and I found pole vaulting. I'm like, pole vaulting, you just look at that and you're like, it's so high. It's like 15, maybe higher feet that you have to use a pole to run and then jump over this, right? Because I was looking at also Olympians. What do Olympians? Because I think we are the Olympians of academia, right? So
Right.
we work so hard for that defense, right? For your doctoral defense. That's like an hour, 2 hours versus Olympians that study they work so hard all their lives for that 1 minute to win that race for the gold medal, right? So I think of us at that caliber, at that level. And so I see the EPPP as the 500 is the thing that we have to jump over, right? It's that pole vault, but with an 800 mindset. So really thinking of like, instead of like, oh, well, I can miss this question, or, oh, I don't have to know this. It's like, no, what's an 800 mindset? How can we jump over? How can I get the most points? So given everything that you've done, like even creating your own study guides, like what do you think helped you that last step? Was it mindset? Was it that you kept taking more tests, that you created your visuals, you had community? Like, what would you say is that thing that helped you pole vault over that 500 score?
So I get this question a lot from a lot of different people. And I do, before I even answer it, I've developed a disclaimer before I give this answer, which is there is no secret sauce to passing the EPPP. Everybody would like a secret sauce. There is not one. The other thing that I do want to point out too is asking somebody what they did to pass is also like, if Chelly was doing keto and like getting amazing results, and I'm like, hey, I'm going to do keto too, and then expecting myself to get the same results that Chelly. So different things. So work for different people.
Love it.
So for myself, the things that I think really contributed is a really consistent meditation practice. And for me, and I noticed I have like the sun is going down where I live. And so I have like
I noticed it too. You still look good. You still look good.
Okay. That's why I just need some verbal validation. The things that I found helpful is I would do meditation at nighttime every night. I really worked on my sleep as well. And I also positive affirmations were part of my journey from the beginning, but that's also just who I am as a person and as a professional. I have stuff plastered all over the place, like little reminders and quotes and things like that. That's just me. After I did that 4-day workshop, which I also found to be really helpful, mostly because it was a great brain dump of a review, which is if you go in thinking about it that way, it doesn't feel as overwhelming. It still like takes a toll on your body.
Yeah, it does.
But it's not like whoosh, like I don't know anything. Really getting to a place where I figured out, okay, I mastered content pretty well. I really worked on my test taking strategies, which really helped get me over that score that I needed. Because taking this test, from my perspective, is very different than taking the GRE, any test I took in my master's program, any test I took in my doctoral program, any test I took in my undergrad. Like, yes, it's a multiple choice test. And if you say that, it sounds easy, but it's really fucking not. So, taking this test, I felt like I had to have the things that worked for me in terms of like test taking no longer worked for me. And it took me a long time to figure out how to analyze the question. What am I looking for? Slowing myself down, because as someone who does have anxiety with exams, I would speed through the question. Gotta hurry up, gotta hurry up, gotta hurry up. The clock is ticking, gotta go, gotta go. Instead of pacing myself, the day I took the test, I didn't start with question 1. I started randomly at like 6.
Really? So you just skipped right to question 6?
I did, because that was a strategy from the workshop, the 4-day workshop I did. The last day, they talked about what does your 30 days before your test look like? And they kind of broke it down and gave some structure and some ideas. And I was like, well, I haven't tried. So again, coming back to, well, what haven't I done? Because I created things to do, and I did things other people did and didn't get what I wanted. So what else can I do?
Right.
So, and I never had this idea of well, I did everything, I guess I'm just screwed. I never had that kind of mindset. So I do think that really helped as well, because I always came back to this place of, well, there has to be something else I can think of. There has to be some other strategy, other something, and I'll just make it up. And so that's what I did. So I started with a different question, and I did that mostly because that took the edge off. Because if I got question 1 and I'm like, I've never heard of these words in my whole life. I don't know what circumscription or whatever is, and I've never read this thing. I would freak out. And yes, that can happen at question 6 too, but it's well, this is question 6. It's not the first question, because I would go back to those. So for me, that was a weird ninja mind game thing. I also used the mouse tutorial, which is 5 minutes. This was another strategy from the workshop that I found really helpful. So I would use that 5 minutes where it's click here, and it's teaching you how to use a mouse. And we're well, if we don't fucking know how to use a mouse to click, we should not have doctorate degrees. Okay, testing program, I'll do your tutorial. So instead of click, 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 click to rush through that, because again, that was my anxiety being we got to hurry, we got to go, we're ready, we're going to forget all the things if we don't do it now. I took that time and I just closed my eyes and I breathed. So I was mindful about the time, because if it times out, if the 5 minute times out, it tells you
the test is done.
Right. Yeah. So I was mindful, it's not I was falling asleep or anything like that.
Yeah.
But that, along with like the positive affirmation, circling back to that, I wrote down my test date, and I started to do this 2 months prior to testing. I always had different affirmations each time I would write on my cheat sheet. The little laminate piece of paper they give you that you can write things down on. And I would write my test date every time I took a practice test. I would write it in the past tense. So I wrote May, whatever, 2019 is the day I passed, like
Okay.
passed the E-triple-P, even though it was like March. I was writing this every time. And I would write also underneath that, like, I know and will remember more than I think that I do.
Got it.
And so that was something that was different that I did. Or those were some things that were different that I did going in. And then again, having time where I don't recommend like you work a full week and then take the test. If that means you have to call in sick, and you're not really, I mean, you can be sick of the E-triple-P. I'm going to call that legit.
In Spanish, we call it harta. Like you're just so sick and tired of it. You're harta. Like you don't want anything to do with it anymore.
So if it's that or whatever, but to use the time, and I would encourage like taking at least 5 days off before you take a test, just so that you can maybe squeeze in another practice exam early in that week. And then the rest of it should not be taking a test. If you want to practice your content, do that with quiz questions. Do not take a test within like 3 to 5 days. I would say if you test it, because if you get a score back and that score is not an amazing score, whatever you view that as, then that can really mess with your confidence going in. So from my perspective, I haven't made a graphic for this yet, but it's on my project list of things to do. So the E-triple-P from my perspective, and also my like combined conversations with like hundreds of other people in the last almost 2 years since I passed, is the E-triple-P really boils down to 4 things. So mastering content, test taking strategies, managing the fuck out of any test anxiety that you have that can totally fuck you over, no matter how great of a test taker you are, no matter how wonderful you know that content backwards and forwards. And then consistency in your studying and practicing with the content. That doesn't mean you have to do it every single day, but it needs to be pretty damn close to that. Even if it's like touching something for 5 minutes, even if it's reading a quick little summary when you're sitting on the toilet, like I don't really care. Like there needs to be consistency and practicing like that free recall, or connecting it to your everyday.
Yeah. Dr. Mercado writes, I wrote all the names of the people in my study group on my whiteboard to ease my anxiety as I took it. So that's really helpful as well.
Oh, that's very sweet.
Yeah.
Too.
Thank you. So can you repeat that, Doc? I said, Dr. Mercado says, I wrote all the names of the people. Oh, the 4 things. I'm sorry. Can you repeat those 4 things, Dr.?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. So it's like a 4-layer cake in my head. I'm going to make a graphic for this, but I know because I'm a foodie. So, and Vero knows that. We've had multiple conversations, and there's food all in my visuals too. So it's a 4-layer. I picture like a wedding cake, except like instead of the top where it's like a bride and groom or bridegroom, it's like your E-triple-P happily ever after is like at the top.
The single sheet of paper.
Yes, single sheet of paper. And so the 4 things are managing the fuck out of your test anxiety, mastering content. And when I say mastering content, I mean, that doesn't mean you have to score 100% or like a 90% on your practice exam breakdown for that area. But it does mean that I would say like when you get pretty like upper 70s, close to 80s, I would say that's demonstrating some level of mastery of content where it doesn't matter how a question or an item or concept is presented to you. You can pretty much, I can identify that means that's this kind of seizure, or they're asking about this kind of imaging, or they're talking about this type of drug, so that you're able to at least hone in somewhat on where's this coming from or what is it. The other
one thing I also talk about, to interrupt, is what means what, right? Because there's a lot of synonyms. There's a lot of like one thing means another thing, which means another thing, which means another thing. For example, if we talk about, homeostasis has a lot of different names to that depending on what domain area you're in. So with that, I would say, what means what, right? AKA what means what. So sorry to interrupt, but keep going with your list of your cake.
Okay. So test taking skills and then the consistent studying and consistent practice.
Awesome.
Those are the 4 things.
And any other words of wisdom? I know we've gone a little bit over the scheduled time, but that's okay because this is such good information. And there also will be a replay.
By the way,
I think we planned for it. Any words of wisdom for those of either first timers or multiple test takers?
I think for first timers, definitely shop around. So all of the 5 testing programs. So again, that's Taylor Study Method, ATABS, Academic Review, Psych Prep, and PrepJet. All of them have a free trial of some sort to give you a little preview of what their program is like. So don't pick for example, don't pick ATABS because your best friend or somebody in your class or somebody else you work with,
or they've got good marketing.
Right. Also, first time test takers, be prepared for your trial. All of them pretty much have you can take a trial practice exam for free. All of them, and I didn't know this until much late. Shelly already knows where I'm going.
Yeah.
On your face. All of them are marketing to scare you to be get a really low score, like 99% of people do that I've encountered anyway. I can't say everybody.
0% readiness or something like that. Yeah.
That you are so low on the totem pole, you so need their help and they can be the ones to help you, which is a marketing strategy for them to get you to, oh, you're right, I don't know anything. Look, I got a 27 on this test and I need a 70. What? So they're all geared to freak you out. They're all hard, the trial practice exams to get you to buy. So make sure that you're just aware of that and also not letting that wreck your level of competency or confidence as a clinician, because this test has nothing to do with how well we can take a test. Our clients could give 2 fucks about how well we can take a test, or if we were ever on academic probation in our programs, which I was, or had to repeat a class, which I did, how well we know stats. Our clients don't care about that, right? Our clients care about my pain points are, which they don't know that language, but I hate my boyfriend, or I'm so depressed and I can't get out of bed, or I'm so anxious every time I go to do a job interview. They come in with a problem. They just want to know, just like a regular medical doctor, of my big toe hurts. Can you fix my big toe?
Yeah. It's about the working alliance and can you help me?
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
This test has nothing to do with can we help you?
Right.
This test is a hurdle. That, and I hate to call it that, because I think that signifies certain things that we're supposed to get through, but it's part of the process in order for us to get licensed, which is important for whatever reasons. But yeah, I think keeping those things in mind. And let's see, I already mentioned no secret sauce to passing. The other thing that I think is important that I get asked a lot is, especially when you've taken the test more than one time, like we have, you accumulate, or sometimes even first-time test takers, if you have hand-me-down access to materials or things like that, we can get inundated with okay, we have flashcards from this company, we have the books from this company, we have all these things. And if you spread it out in your study space, it can be overwhelming. And not everything, I promise. I would be willing to bet money, which is something Shelly would know I do not do, because I very much value my money. But I would be willing to bet money that you have, whoever's listening or watching, that you have stuff, whether it's stuff you purchase, stuff that's hand-me-down, that is not working or serving you.
Right.
And you feel guilty for not using it, or you feel like you're not getting your money's worth. And I just want to give permission to whoever needs permission, not that you need mine specifically, to pick the things that work for you and leave the other things out.
So I think we both have this for 2021, but I have a little thing that says less is more, right?
This is my I made
That's
a little flyer. My word for the year is less. I haven't put
yeah.
it somewhere yet, but
And I think that's such a good point because when I started my journey, I was unemployed and then I was underemployed because I had a lot of like grant jobs and gigs and things. So I couldn't afford the study materials. I had to get creative. So a lot of people were super generous and kind and I had a lot of hand-me-downs. Some of them were a bit older. I inherited a box from somebody who's super awesome. But I was just like, oh my God, this is so overwhelming. I don't know what to do. And then I wouldn't do anything because I would freeze. Right. But I think to your point is pick one track and pick that track. So for example, now I'm working with, I'm using PrepJet study material and I'm listening to the audio for Psych Prep because that's a perfect combination to my personality, my style, their humor, Dr. Jablon's humor, love her humor. So pick a lane and stick on that lane and then switch lanes whenever you have to, right? But we're like, again, visual, we're on a highway. Personally, when I'm taking a long drive, I pick the fourth lane and I stay on that fourth lane as far as I can. And I pivot, I switch, when I need to, but I always go back to that lane. So pick a lane and kind of test that out, see how that goes. Anything else? Anything on your list?
let me see. I think those are some of the main. I'm sure that there's more that I've written down, but those are some of the main things.
Mhm.
And what I encourage people is like, yes, pick a lane. Going with that highway metaphor. And you can like detour and consult. So let's say like you have A tabs and that works for you and that's awesome. The main thing at the end of the day, it doesn't matter like what you use. It's just, does it work for you?
Right.
So if A tabs works for you, and that's just for our example, for my example. So you're in the A tabs lane, but you're like, well, I'm not clear about the difference between James Lang and Cannon Bard. And I don't feel like A tabs, and I have no idea. I'm just making something up. I don't feel like they did it. I'm not getting it from how they explained it in their volumes or on their flashcards. I'm not understanding, or their workshop or their
Mm.
audios. So then detour, if you already also have psych prep stuff, like I'm going to detour real quick just to look up this quick little thing in psych prep because psych prep helped a little, but ATABS is better.
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel that way, but that's just me. And
Well,
you
PrepJet does a nice job of. I'm like, as soon as you said it, I was like, oh, I know that one.
good. So detour a little bit just to pull that material out, consult with it to be like, okay. And then
Yeah.
kind of go back to you're still in your ATABS lane and you're not overwhelmed with like, I have all these things and I don't know
Right. Mm-hmm.
what to do.
So, Dr. Nichole, what's next for you? So this EPPP Journey and Beyond podcast, and I had a lot of input from some colleagues in my study group that talked about the beyond piece, right? Because the beyond is the important part. It's not just EPPP you pass and then boom, you're done. It's like, oh, now we get to start our careers, we get to continue our careers, we get to do the things we always wanted to do. I know you talk about a bucket list. I saw one of your posts. So what's next for you? I know that so I want to know what's next for you. Where can people find you? What are you up to? Dr. Veronica Mercado asks, any new parts to the study guide or updates? I know you had mentioned something like that. So where are you at? Tell us more.
So right now, I'm still going to stick with my full-time job, which is working for the Department of Defense, at least for another, let's say 7 months. And I also have a part-time private telehealth. I'm telling you, these things really don't like my ears. Um, I have a part-time telehealth practice that I had planned to do even before COVID was a thing. So I have that as well on the side where I see clients and do therapy because therapy is my jam. I don't really get to do therapy for my job right now, my big girl job working for the Department of Defense. I am planning to continue to wholeheartedly, as much as I can, carve out time and support multiple test takers to pass. And so my whole vision behind creating the things, because I also create a lot of free content as well, handouts mostly because I'm like, and on an internship, I had the nickname of like being the handout fairy because I always had handouts or would make handouts and I would like leave them on people's desks and chairs to use with their clients that I would hear about. in case they wanted to use them. So I love making handouts. It's like one of my favorite things. So I make handouts not so much for content, I make it more for support. So these are things for like time management. I just had an idea today for something else I'm going to make as a supportive kind of thing to help structure study schedules, content, learning material, emotional support in terms of like how do you continue to go, get motivation, things like that. So I'm going to keep doing that for as long as my heart's excited about it, and supporting people so that they don't struggle, hopefully don't struggle as much as I have with my own process. And I had a lot of support. I know not everybody does. And I had a lot of things still in my favor, and it still fucking was awful and terrible, even with a supportive husband and a job that was stable and other things, like it was still can be very isolating. So my job is to help it feel less like that and help people feel less ashamed of failing this exam and realizing like you failed your way to success, which is something that I recently heard this week. And I was just like, oh, that's totally me. Like I totally failed my way to success with the P. That's exactly what I did. I kept failing until I didn't, and thinking until I didn't have to anymore.
And a note on that word failure is, I know that it's very negatively charged sometimes, or at least it appears that way, and it is to some extent. However, in the entrepreneurial world, it's not a bad word, right?
It's a growth word. Yeah.
It's a growth word. So in the entrepreneurial world, when you're launching a business, they say fail fast. Like, how fast can you fail? Because as soon as you fail, you pivot. Yeah. So it's, and you only fail when you stop trying, is what they say, which is why I love entrepreneurship, because it's this like go-getter mindset and pivot, what works, what didn't work, innovate, pivot. And that's what we're doing in the time of COVID, right? So a lot of our field had to pivot to telehealth, telepsychology. Even though there was much resistance, but we have to pivot. So failure, to me, and I created a graphic for this, is based on Brene Brown, is daring greatly. We got on the court, the Theodore Roosevelt quote, you get into the arena, you're marred, and you got beat up basically, and you get up, right? You got beat up, but you dust yourself off, you take care of whatever you need to take care of, give yourself the time to grieve, to take care of yourself, and then get up, right? It's not easy, right? But one of the feedback that I've received from my personal circle is that I get up faster. They're like, oh, you bounce back faster this time. And yeah, so it's like, oh, okay, don't get hung up on that. Oh, I didn't pass, but innovate, keep going. And I love that you keep supporting the community in this way. And so I know you're on Facebook. Yeah. You're on Instagram as EPP champion, EPP champion. You have your study guides that are available via DM or Etsy. Are you anywhere else where we can find you?
So I would say that's pretty much all the places. So the Etsy, because it actually was my jewelry, a platform where I sold jewelry before, and Megan in the future, but that's a different brand name. So it's Bedazzle, Beadazzle, Bedazzle by NV. So NV for my initials, Nichole Vincent Studio. Or sending me a note on Facebook, so just Nichole Vincent. So I do spell my name with H because I'm unique like a unicorn, and that's what my mom decided to do for my name. Oh, speaking, is this on topic a little bit? I was also thinking when I was preparing for this conversation here today. So my name, do you know what your name means, Shelly? Like, have you ever looked, or Araceli, have you ever looked at like the meaning of your name?
So my full name is Araceli Araceli, and my mom told me that it means angel of God, but I haven't fully done more research. Chelly's my nickname, so that's what I use on social media. But it's Araceli, angel of God, I believe.
Oh, that's very sweet. So Nichole means victory of the people. And yeah, and I've known that since I was a little kid, just because I looked it up at some point and it stuck with me. And I always, anytime I do like a personality test or like things like this, I always get this stuff back like leadership. And that's not ever something I associate with myself as being a leader, but I have come to see like I am in different kind of capacities or roles. But I really have, like, just with the E-Triple-P, I feel like I really do like embrace, and I'm still embracing, like, imposter syndrome is a thing for me too. But really just this idea of like I help people gain their E-Triple-P victory. So I'm not guaranteeing that, but at least in terms of like understanding content, more
Oh,
of the
right. And
Mhm.
you also do one-to-one coaching, which I'll be signing up
Ooh,
again. So yeah,
yay! I'd love
yeah,
to have you.
I
We
recommend
had
her
a great like
coaching.
5-hour cram session right
Yeah,
before.
yeah. And it was, even though I didn't pass, but that's okay. What I learned, like it's here, right? So
Mhm.
it's there. So that was super helpful. Well, I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to meet with us, to share your insights. I know we've gone over, so thank you for those of us still watching. I'll share a little bit about, what I'm doing, and then we'll close it out. So basically, the Mindful E-Triple-P Journey is a community on Facebook. It's a free resource that you can join. In order to be part of it, you do have to be on the E-Triple-P Journey. And this is to support, anybody that is either just starting the journey or it's been in a while. Again, this little mountain to me, just, I love watercolor, and it just signifies like it is a journey, right? It's not a one stop shop. There's not like, if I do A, B, C, D through Z, then I'll get licensed. It's, some people do A, B, C, some people do A through Z, right? I do run an accountability group membership. This is a study group that runs on Saturdays, 11 to 2 Pacific Standard Time. And the time is to account for our various time zones. And as a bonus day, I've added a Wednesday where we meet 3:30 to 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. This is a paid membership. You can have a trial to the group to see if it's a good fit. And part of my launching this is seeing the need for consistency, right? So what happens is like, well, why should I pay for a group? And there's a lot of great groups out there. But for here, I commit to facilitating the group even after I pass. Because what happens is a lot of people pass and then the group kind of disintegrates and then you have to start over again. And it's a unique type of group. It's not, every group is different, but you're free to check it out with a free trial. And if you want, then you can sign up for the membership. It's a really, really great group right now. It's really amazing for the members that we do have in there. Again, the E-Triple-P, my vision is comparing it to pole vaulting. We're pole vaulting over that 500 score, but with an 800 mindset, right? How many questions can I get right? Not, oh, I can miss this question, because we want to make sure that we pass, and we only need a 500 to pass go and collect $200. I know Dr. Liza Sanchez had asked if Dr. Nichole had taken the KIPLE, that's the California exam, and she's in Texas, so she did not. But I will be bringing on more guests. I will have guests also that have passed on the first attempt, because I think those stories are also important for us to know. And I will be bringing on some people that have taken the California exam as well. So if you know anybody whose story you think that we should hear, please reach out to me either in the comments or DM me, or, so the Mindful E-Triple-P Journey is a community where we support each other, not only in the exam, but also in life and career. This image, I really scoured the internet to find an image that represented what I envision, and is that I come from the background as a first gen college student, that it's our responsibility to bring those that come behind us. It's our responsibility to help. And that's why I love Dr. Nichole, because she is of the same mindset, that even though she's passed, she's still committed. Because I know that a lot of the stuff that she does for free. So I know that her heart is in it to help us. So you can find more information at the mindfuletripplePjourney.com. And you can find me at Ganas and Go, both on Instagram and Facebook. I'm newly on Clubhouse. I'd love to talk to anybody that is on Clubhouse. Right now, it is for iPhone members or iPhone holders, but they will be opening it up. My best way of describing Clubhouse is basically a live conference podcast. So it's like they have different rooms. You walk in, so it's like you're walking into a conference, but it's in a podcast style and it's live, so you can interact. So I'm actually going to be starting some conversations on there. So if anybody is on Clubhouse, I would love for you to connect. And you can also find me on Instagram and Facebook at Mindful EPPP Journey. I know some of you follow me there, and the idea is to keep, going, echándole ganas, keep going. And the ganas is that drive that we have, and the go piece is the behavioral activation piece. So we got to keep going. And then Dr. Liza, so if anybody has comments, Dr. Liza Sanchez says, thank you so much. I enjoyed getting these valuable tips, and I bought the ninja notes. Amazing. So yeah, if you guys want to connect with either of us, please send us a DM. And I know Dr. Nichole and I have a lot of, once I get licensed, we're definitely taking off with all of our ideas.
There are quite a few cool collaborations coming up.
Yeah. And if anybody would like to collaborate, yeah, totally. So thank you so much again for being with us today. It's been such an honor. You are one of my EPPP heroes. You're one of the people that I found, and I think you were my salvation in this process. I was like, man, I got to talk to her. Like, how does she do it? And so I know your heart is in it. I know you care. You give a shit about us passing, and I love how, similar to me, we've transformed that anger and that frustration and that helplessness and hopelessness into something magical, like helping others. Yeah. So I'm really grateful for you. I'm grateful for everybody that was able to watch live. You can watch the replay. This will be available. And also this will be in podcast episode once I get to that stage. But right now it's like, I just want to launch. I'll figure out the tech later. I just want to launch
on the back end. Yeah. And I also just want to say I'm super honored that you asked me to even be a guest, and you made this like first experience of being interviewed like really, really easy peasy. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. Oh, it's your first podcast episode, right?
Yep.
Yay! Amazing. Well, thank you again for your time, and I greatly appreciate you. So thank you. Bye, all.
That's all for this episode of the Mindful EPPP Journey and Beyond podcast. May this enlightening conversation give you refreshing hope that becoming a licensed psychologist is possible. If they can do it, so can you. Be sure to subscribe to the show at mindfulePPPjourney.com for more inspiring episodes like this one. Don't forget to share with your friends who may also need powerful words of encouragement in their own licensing journey. Thank you for joining us. Until next time, vamos a seguir echándole ganas.